very good morning and welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha with the breakfast news. Let's look at the top stories first. Mangalyaan gets Red Planet inside. Crucial liquid engine test fired successfully to inject it into Mars orbit. Protesters flood New York's financial district ahead of the UN summit on climate change to get underway today. Demonstrations around the world calling for a cut in carbon emissions. Sino-Indian border tussle intensifies. Armies face off in the Chuma region of Ladakh. Army chief cancels Bhutan visit. United Nations issues appeal for help as over 130,000 Syrian refugees cross over into Turkey, the largest influx since the Syrian crisis began in 2011. And today is to be ace Indian shooter Abhinav Bindra's last in professional shooting. Bindra announced his retirement yesterday at the ongoing Asian Games in Incheon. All is on track for India's maiden Mars mission to enter the Red Planet's orbit in less than 24 hours from now. The satellite cleared a crucial test yesterday with the main rocket engine that has been lying dormant since the launch being successfully test-fired. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Bangalore for the orbiter insertion. Here's a report.
The 440-Newton liquid apogee motor engine of India's Mars orbiter mission was successfully test-fired on Monday, putting the country on course for creating history in space science. The LAM engine, idling for the last 300 days on the Mars orbiter mission, or MOM as it is affectionately called, was fired for 4 seconds, raising the confidence level of the Indian Space Research Organization. The test firing has raised levels of hope about the success of inserting the spacecraft into the Martian orbit. The trajectory of the spacecraft has also been corrected. The insertion is planned for early Wednesday. Expressing joy after the engine was reignited, ISRO Chief K. Radhakrishnan said, and I quote, "The spacecraft is healthy, it has completed 98% of its journey to Mars, and we are now prepared for that crucial operation to take place on September 24th morning." If the Mangalyaan enters the Martian orbit, it will make India the first country to succeed on a maiden mission. It will also be the first Asian country and ISRO the fourth space agency to send a satellite to the Red Planet. European, US and Russian probes have managed to orbit or land on the planet, but only after several attempts. Probes to Mars have a high failure rate. Of the 51 missions so far, only 21 have succeeded. A similar mission by China failed in 2011. Earlier on Monday, the unmanned probe entered the Mars gravitational sphere of influence.
It is very important because on 24th in morning when the Mars orbiter mission has to enter Mars orbit, so that has to be tested because it has been dormant for all these months, about 10 months it has been dormant. So it has to be tested, and there was some minor orbital correction. So both has been successfully achieved today. Future mission Mars will be not only Indian mission. Any important big science missions are international missions. We are studying Mars like many other missions are doing, how Mars originated, how Mars lost water. Is there a possibility of life on Mars even now after water has been discovered on Mars, frozen water? And future, how is it possible to make Mars habitable?
The Mars orbiter mission was launched into space on 5th November last year. On its 666 million kilometer journey, the spacecraft escaped the Earth's gravity pull on December 1st. On September 24th, in its last lap, the orbiter has to be slowed down from 22.1 kilometers per second to 4.4 kilometers per second in relation to the Red Planet. The engine would be fired for 24 minutes on that day to reduce its velocity and insert it into the Martian orbit. ISRO has already uploaded commands to help the spacecraft automatically enter the orbit. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And you can watch our continuous coverage on the journey of India's Mars orbiter, Mangalyaan, in our special show, Mars and Beyond, today from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And as India's mom, as it's affectionately called, was on course to its destination, NASA's Maven spacecraft began orbiting Mars today. The NASA robotic spacecraft had fired its braking rockets on Sunday, ending a 10-month journey to put itself into orbit around the red planet and begin a hunt for the planet's lost water. After traveling 771 million kilometers, the Mars atmosphere and volatile evolution, or Maven, trimmed its speed from 20,600 kilometers per hour to 16,093 kilometers per hour. The 33-minute engine firing left Maven in the clutches of Mars's gravity as it flew over the planet's north pole and slipped into a looping orbit. Over the next several weeks, Maven will lower its altitude until it reaches its operational orbit. It will study how the solar wind strips away atoms and molecules in the planet's upper atmosphere, a process that scientists believe has been underway for eons.
Shedding light on one of the solar system's biggest.
One orbit, Earth-centered, to a...
All I can say at this point is we're in orbit at Mars, guys. And we've taken 11 years to get here, and now we get to do the science that we've been planning for all this time.
And with that, we'll slip into a short break here. Still to come, WHO reports victories against Ebola in Senegal and Nigeria, though the death toll continues to rise. We'll have all that and much more on the other side. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Breakfast News. Now, despite China's assurances, a standoff continues in Ladakh's Chumar area. Chinese army has reportedly pitched tents within the Indian territory. The Indian army is on high alert to counter any threat. Here's a report.
The Chinese army continues to remain within Indian territory in Ladakh's Chumar region. Nearly 100 personnel of the PLA are estimated to be around Point 30R, strategically an important post. They have reportedly pitched tents in the area. Indian Army has also mobilized force to counter any threat. 15 battalions as well as reserve units have been kept in eastern Ladakh on high alert. Army Chief General Dalbir Singh Suhag has called off his 4-day visit to Bhutan, which was scheduled to start today.
ज़मीन बहुत कठिन जगह है, वहाँ exactly कौन सा spot में क्या लगा है, इसका report देना पड़ता है, हम ऐसे प्रतिक्रिया देना ठीक नहीं होगा.
On Sunday, India called off a media exchange program with China over the issue of incursions. Visas given to Chinese journalists were withdrawn at the last moment.
They are keen on economic investment in India, which means that Prime Minister Modi has left it in no unambiguous terms to say that there is a huge potential to be realized on the economic front, but that will happen provided the Chinese work on bringing about greater clarity on the line of actual control, that the borders remain peaceful and tranquil.
Meanwhile, the Chinese Defense Ministry has come out with a statement on the issue for the first time. It claimed that there are differing perceptions of the line of actual control. It has also said that the two nations can resolve the issue through dialogue. The chiefs of staff of the PLA met in Beijing on Sunday. It is not clear whether the border standoff in Ladakh was discussed. Diplomatic channels are now working overtime to de-escalate the border imbroglio after 3 flag meetings between local military commanders failed to make any headway. With inputs from Akhilesh Suman, Bureau Report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Moving on now, mass rallies and protests against climate change turned chaotic in the US on Monday, with clashes and face-off between climate change protesters in New York's financial district. The UN Summit on Climate Change, to be attended by 120 nations, gets underway in New York today. Take a look at this report.
As the clock ticks down to UN Secretary-General's much-anticipated climate summit at UN headquarters in New York, politicians, celebrities, activists and general public marched through the city to highlight global concerns on climate change. In Wall Street, rallies turned chaotic following a face-off with police and protesters.
Absolutely. Wall Street invests in all the polluting, wasteful, toxic, destructive and extractive industries that are causing this crisis. Wall Street itself profits from the destruction of this planet and its human and natural resources. So we have to stop them.
The Wall Street rally follows a historic demonstration on Sunday in which more than 3 lakh marchers took to the streets of Manhattan and 2,700 climate events were held worldwide. The massive mobilization is aimed at transforming climate change from an environmental concern to an everybody issue. It's also aimed at demanding changes that will lead to a world economy run entirely on clean energy. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon also joined the march. The UN chief stressed that there is no plan B for action as there is no planet B.
By such a strong power and energy and voice of people, I hope this voice will be truly reflected to the leaders when they meet on September 23rd. Climate change is a defining issue of our time, and there is no time to lose.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry opened the New York Climate Week on Monday.
That the United States will be contributing $15 million to kickstart the World Bank's new pilot auction facility. This initiative will set up a guaranteed price for each ton of methane that project developers are able to cut from their facilities. Methane is 20 times more dangerous and damaging than carbon dioxide.
The People's Climate March was set up ahead of the UN Climate Change Summit, in which 120 world leaders will come together to discuss on various strategies to reduce carbon emissions that threaten the environment. Negotiators aim to complete their deal in Paris in late 2015. Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar will represent India in the summit. The 6 days of debates will feature leaders addressing global issues and threat of climate change, among others. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And to discuss more on the story, we have with us this morning in our studio Professor Chandrakumar Varshni, former Dean at the School of Environment Sciences and Professor of Emirates at the JNU. A very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, sir. Before every climate change, we see massive protests, massive mobilizations. This time around, it looks very different. What is it that makes the protest this time very different?
Actually, the climate change is continuing and escalating. And this protest is really to impress upon people, industry, and those who are responsible for emitting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to really mend their ways and to adopt the strategies as well as processes so that large emissions can be cut. And this is at the eve of the global summit, which the UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, has invited in his personal initiative to really create a climate so that we have a positive and a strong and a legally binding treaty in 2015, because the last treaty, which ended its term in 2012, and now we don't have any treaty which really provides any framework or even demands that the greenhouse gas emission should be really curtailed and brought down so that the earth could be saved from the ravaging devastation caused by the climate change, which is really creating havoc of different kinds around the world, and large number of people who have nothing to do with the emission of the carbon dioxide are the sufferers.
So at this meet, do we see nations agreeing to an international treaty to reduce greenhouse gas?
Look, the purpose of this meeting is not really to negotiate any treaty per se, but to create a climate so that people and the opinion makers and the industry understands the issue and the gravity of it, and then create an atmosphere back their home so that their respective governments come with a positive attitude and really have a cooperative environment of give and take, so that a very justifiable and a very equitable decision could be made and a law could be passed, which we call as international treaty or things of that kind. That is a new avatar of Kyoto Protocol, by which the countries will be responsible and committed to cut down the emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases.
And on that respect, do we see a commitment from the United States? Because the US Secretary of State has made a statement. He's compared climate change to the fight against Ebola and to the fight against Islamic State?
I think you have raised a very interesting question, because this kind of a commitment has been lingering on and has not been able to crystallize and formalize and finalize simply because that the US and other industrialized countries drag their feet. You see, when we talk of cutting the carbon dioxide emission, it means that we have to revise our style of living and living standard, which means that we have to prune that affluent way of living and as overconsumption of resources and the goods. And I think it is here that we find that the West is not fully agreeable, and therefore the process of negotiation keeps on prolonging. And now from 72 we started talking about the environment, and it is now 2014, and we have not been able to really finalize a very agreeable and a very cooperative atmosphere in which a purposeful and a very effective treaty could be really hammered out.
Right. Coming to India, Mr. Varshni, a global carbon project source reveals that India has seen a massive rise, a 5.1% rise in emitting greenhouse gas. What are the steps that India can take to cut greenhouse gas emissions?
Let me just make this point very clear. Per capita emission of greenhouse gases in India is perhaps among the lowest bracket. And therefore, our greenhouse emission per capita is very low. However, because we have to develop and we are really the beginning of our development, we require energy, and therefore the emissions are likely to be more.
But it is one among those 4 countries, along with the US, China and the European Union, which are the largest emitters, accounting for 58% of emissions.
That's right, at this point of time. But historically speaking, it is the West which has been pumping this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases, the impact and the implication of which we are now suffering in a big way. For example, the flood in the Kashmir, as well as in the previous year in the Uttarakhand, the kind of devastation that has been caused by the heavy rains is clearly, to a considerable extent, appears to be contributed by the global warming. So many of those people who have no contribution to this global warming are the sufferers. So I think historically, build-up of the carbon dioxide is responsible. And what the developing country is desirous of, that they should really own this historical responsibility and accordingly really take the responsibility of providing a lion's share, so that we are able to really adapt ourselves and prepare ourselves to meet this onslaught of climate change.
Right, Professor Varshni, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your analysis.
Thank you so much.
Now, moving on to the Syrian crisis. The UN's refugee agency says Turkey urgently needs help to care for 130,000 Syrian refugees who have crossed the border in recent days. This is said to be the largest influx in such a short period since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011. BBC reports the US is saying it has started airstrikes in Syria.
Thousands of Syrians flocking to Turkey, desperately fleeing to escape the onslaught of the Islamic State militants. After over 130,000 Kurdish refugees crossed over in the past 2 days, Turkey is now closing a few border crossings.
Allah muhafaza, tabii bunların Suriye'nin içerisinde başka yerlere gitmiş olduklarını tahmin ediyoruz. Ama yani yoğun yüz binlerle ifade edilecek bir göç dalgası muhtemeldir.
Most of the refugees are from Kobane, left to fend for themselves as officials struggled to cope with their numbers. With 1 million Syrian refugees flooding Turkey over the last 3 years, tensions have become a constant feature between the police and the Kurds on both sides of the border.
We're approaching in Turkey 1.6 million refugees, and now over 100,000 influx, and quite frankly, we don't know when those numbers will end.
Kurdish leaders appeal to Barack Obama to send the US Air Force to give it cover from the militants. Although the US said it will attack the group in Syria, it has so far carried out airstrikes only in Iraq.
Secretary Kerry convened a meeting of the Security Council on Friday where more than 40 countries spoke in support of the anti-ISIL effort, half at the ministerial level. So we're seeing a diverse range of forms of support, and the commitments are coming in every day.
As world leaders are gathering in New York this week for the UN General Assembly meeting, US plans to lobby allies for pledges of concrete military assistance to help defeat Islamic State.
Et cette semaine, bien sûr, une semaine très importante pour les Nations Unies et pour le monde, nous allons de nouveau travailler ensemble sur la question de l'Irak et de la Syrie.
This comes even as IS in its latest video called on its followers to attack citizens of the United States, France and other countries that have joined a coalition to destroy the militant group. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And let's now take a look at some other news from around the globe in our World Wrap. The WHO says Senegal and Nigeria, 2 of the 5 countries affected by the world's worst ever Ebola outbreak, are managing to halt the spread of the disease. No new Ebola cases have been reported in Senegal and Nigeria for several weeks, according to the WHO. But the organization reports that the overall death toll due to Ebola has gone beyond 28,000. The United States on Monday has said that it would refuse to seek Iran's cooperation in fighting Islamic State militants by being more flexible in the negotiations of 6 world powers with Tehran on its nuclear program. The White House says the idea was unacceptable and is entirely separate from President Barack Obama's attempts to build a coalition against the Islamic State. The Iraqi government has said at least 40 Iraqi soldiers were killed by a series of suicide attacks by Islamic State militants on Sunday. 68 Iraqi soldiers were also captured. The attacks dealt a heavy blow to government efforts to rein in the militants whose rampage has seized much of the country's north and western regions. Libya's elected parliament has approved a new cabinet proposed by Prime Minister Abdullah Al-Thani. This even as foreign ministers from 13 countries along with the European Union and the UN on Monday called for an immediate ceasefire in Libya. The communique issued on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York asked the warring factions to end a bitter power struggle between rival governments. Thousands of students in Hong Kong braved sweltering heat on Monday to demand greater democracy as they launched a week-long boycott of classes, underscoring a restive younger generation's determination to challenge the Chinese Communist Party. Wearing yellow ribbons, students from more than 20 universities and colleges chanted slogans on unity and a call for democracy. Take a look at the global stock markets now. US stocks closed lower on Monday as the latest housing data came in much weaker than expected, raising new concerns about the rate of growth in the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 107.06 points or 0.62% to close the day at 17,172. The Standard & Poor's 500 lost 16.11 points or 0.8% to end the day at 1,994. The Nasdaq Composite dropped 52.10 points or 1.14% to close the trading at 4,527. Asian markets mostly slipped yesterday on profit-taking after the big gains at the end of last week. Japan's Nikkei slumped by 115.27 points or 0.7% to end the business at 16,205. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index sank 1.44% or 350.67 points to close at 23,955. Gold continued its downtrend as it fell by 100 rupees or 0.15% to 26,550 rupees per 10 grams on reduced demand from retail consumers amid bearish global cues. Silver plunged by 830 rupees or 0.34% to finish at 39,680 rupees per kg due to heavy speculative unwinding with subdued industrial offtake. It will be the last professional outing today for Olympic gold medalist and India's ace shooter Abhinav Bindra. The 31-year-old shooter will compete at the 10 meters air rifle event at the Incheon Asiad for the last time in his professional career. Bindra announced his retirement on social media yesterday. The 2008 Beijing Olympic champion had hinted at retirement just before he won the Commonwealth Games gold earlier this year in Glasgow. Bindra did say, however, that he will still continue to shoot and compete as a hobby shooter. And besides Abhinav Bindra's 10-meter rifle event today, let's take a look at some other developments for India at the Incheon Games. Indian shooters added another medal to India's tally as women's pistol team won bronze in the 25 meters pistol event. The trio of Rahi Sarnobat, Anisa Saeed and Hina Sidhu collected a total of 1,729 points to finish third behind South Korea and China. This was India's fourth medal in shooting. Indian squash players created history as Deepika Pallikal bagged the first medal in women's squash after settling for bronze in her semi-final match. Pallikal lost 4-11, 4-11, 5-11 against world number 1 Nicole David of Malaysia. In men's singles, Saurabh Ghoshal stormed into the singles final, assuring India of at least a silver medal. Ghoshal beat Beng Hee of Malaysia 11-9, 11-4, 11-5 in 45 minutes. Indian women's hockey team started their campaign on a winning note by drubbing Thailand 3-0 in a one-sided Pool A match. India took the lead through Poonam Rani in the 15th minute before Vandana Kataria and Deepika scored the other 2 goals. India will next face title favourites China tomorrow. Looking ahead to today, India can expect more medals from shooting on day 4 as both men's and women's team will be in action. The women's team will be in action in the trap team, an individual event, while men's team will participate in the 25 meters rapid fire pistol and 10 meters air rifle. Commonwealth Games gold medalist Satish Sivalingam will be in action today in the men's 77 kg event. In women's section, Poonam Yadav will be seen in the 63 kg event. In Wushu, Thodam, Santhoy Devi and Narendra Grewal will play their respective semi-final matches. Both have already been assured of a bronze medal. India added 2 more bronze medals on day 3 on Monday to take India's tally to 6. Here's a look at the medals tally. China has surged up to top on the medals tally with 26 golds after being at second position yesterday. Host South Korea are at second place with 14 golds, followed closely by Japan at third place with 13 golds. India has slipped to 13th place with 1 gold and 5 bronze medals. Well, that's all we have for you in Breakfast News today. Thanks for watching.